Hey guys, how's it going today? I wanted to just drop in and talk about this idea that I've sort of had germinating for a while in various different forms, and that's the idea of what I refer to as emotional territorialism. Okay, um, and so the sort of basic way to define that, before I get into it any further, the basic way to define it is basically this tendency that some people have to somehow or another cause people to think or act in a way that is in sync with your own emotional boundaries, your own sensibilities, and not theirs, right? To have your sensibilities be front and center in other people's minds, in other words. Um, and so a really basic example of this, and what might be the most common example of this, is via accusation, right? So if you have like a socially credible accusation that you can hurl at someone, then when that person is around you, that's going to be front of mind. They're going to be doing everything they can to avoid having that happen, right? So one kind of prescient example here is if you're, let's say that you're in a very sort of woke environment, right? A woke social environment, and with everything going on right now, especially, let's say you're a white person, um, and you're talking to a black person, you're probably going to have it front of mind to some degree that you're really don't want to say something that is or somehow comes off as racist, or even somehow like convincingly adjacent to racism, right? Depending on the sort of environment you're in. So in other words, you've internalized, and by the way, the given any given person you're talking to might not even care that much, but the point is that you've internalized some imagined sensibility, which maybe it's even the sensibility of an author you've read or something like that. But you have another person's emotional boundaries front of mind, and are sort of prioritizing them over your own. And of course, like to some limited extent, that's just part of like being human, but it gets to a point where it's chronic, right? And so, like with the racism example, uh, it's sort of gotten to a point where, depending on where you live and who you hang out with, it's sort of like the number of things that could conceivably be racist. The threshold for racism is pretty low, right? It can be any number of things in any number of situations, and that's almost sort of the point. That's the encroachment, in other words. The territorial encroachment is that, at any given time in any given situation, and speaking about any given topic, I still have to make sure that I prioritize this set of sensibilities. I have to hold that in mind and sort of carefully dance around. Um, and another example of that is with men and women, right? I mean, if you're a younger man, if you're a man who's like millennial or younger, there's a good chance you were sort of trained from a pretty young age to understand that there's just any number of small to medium sized transgressions you can make when talking to a woman that would peg you as creepy, or sort of engaging in something that resembles harassment. Um, and so if you've learned that, right, if you've sort of been conditioned by that, then same thing. You're a man talking to a woman. You're going to sort of have it front of mind that you don't want to say or do something that's going to come off creepy in some way. And so it's like these sort of words of power that reverberate, right? They reverberate in your mind, and they cause you to sort of remember to prioritize X and not Y. Remember to behave in a way that is catering to this person's emotional boundaries and this person's sensibilities, and not your own. And so that's how it works with accusations. I think it's similar. A slur is sort of another example. if there's a slur that somebody can acceptably call you, it's really almost the same thing. You don't want to run afoul of this, behave in a way that runs afoul of I guess, this negative stereotype that's defined by this slur. And I think a slightly different way is this sort of like this aggressive hypersensitivity, right? This aggressive, like, I was traumatized. I was, this, these words are violence, and I'm traumatized. I can't even believe I have to hear this. I feel undone by this. I feel invalidated. It's all to say, it's all to send the message that my vulnerabilities, my sensibilities are to be prioritized, are to be front of mind. Right? That's sort of the message that's being sent. And it becomes a problem, right? And so you speak of prioritizing, right? Prioritizing certain sensibilities over others. Well, consider there's this whole there's this whole perspective. There's this whole subfield that they call attention economics, right? And I haven't studied it deeply, but I have some understanding of it. And basically, attention economics is based on the idea that human beings have a limited amount of attention, and they can only think about so many things at a given time, right? And so a lot of what the field revolves around is sort of maximizing various, whether you're talking about a website or a business or some government agency. How do you maximize it for human attention, right? How do you optimize it given the fact that human beings have limited attention? And by the way, that becomes especially relevant in the sort of information-rich environment we're in, right? Where you're just constantly being assailed with information. There need to be sort of efficiencies in place, right? There needs your attention sort of needs to be gatekept in some way. And I think that point of view also applies here, right? And it applies in a kind of dangerous way, because when you successfully complete this sort of overlay, right, this emotional territorial overlay, where I'm now thinking in terms of your sensibilities and not mine, then, well, given the fact that I have limited attention, given the fact that I can only think about so many things, in a sense, you're controlling my perception. You're effectively seizing the ports. And what I mean by seizing the ports is like if you imagine all the various possibilities out there of things that you could think about, right? And then imagine that there's sort of this bottleneck, right? There's this little bottleneck that only so many things can go through and actually be thought about. So you're controlling the bottleneck. You're storming the bottleneck. You're storming the ports of exchange. You're saying, no, what the stuff that I want you to think about is what's going to get through here, because you're keeping my sensibilities front of mind. So that's going to frame what you choose to focus on. It's going to frame the information that you're looking to take in. And so it's really when the system is sufficiently complete, it becomes almost this full system of brainwashing, right? And I think there's sort of similar things employed with people who are just in abusive relationships, or people who are sex trafficked, for example. There's sort of similar tactics at work, and so it becomes quite a problem, I think. And it's very prevalent. It's really this technique is everywhere, in person-to-person relations, in the media. It really is everywhere. And as far as what can be done, I mean, one thing I'd say, just to sort of round out this video, one thing I'd say that could be done is literally to sort of make it a thing, right? To talk about it, to have sort of iterative discussions about it, where we really hash out what this thing is, how it works, and how it affects people, where we vent about how it's affected us, how it's affected society, and really just keep talking about it because you think about a term like racism, right? Which I think a lot of people would agree that there was probably a time when the word racism didn't have enough power, and it sort of has gotten to a point where it's a little too electric, right? Like too many things that can credibly that it can credibly apply to. And given that it's the consequences of being called thus are perhaps a little severe, but it didn't just get that way overnight, right? It became a thing over time through applied practice, through applied discourse. Um, and so in a similar way, I think by talking about this until we have something like a buzzword, right? And I know emotional territorialism is kind of awkward to say. I don't think that's going to be the buzzword if there is one, but the point being that it needs to be discussed, and it needs to be just hashed out and vented about in a way that it eventually just becomes a thing which similarly applies to any number of situations, to where any situation where I'm communicating with someone might sort of trigger this alarm, like, wait a minute, am I being territorialized? Is someone seizing the ports? Is this a pirate I'm speaking to? What's really going on here? But that possibility needs to be encoded into a word which is woven into the consciousness, which is understood in real terms, to the extent that you can effectively resist it. So yeah, that's basically what I say about it for now. I mostly just wanted to put that concept out there. I'm going to expound on it more in other videos. But please, if you crave this type of content, if you love this type of content, or are just sort of vaguely curious about it, subscribe, press the like button. I'm going to have a lot of content coming out soon. It's not just going to be me talking about my thoughts and feelings. Of course, we're going to be getting into various academic studies. We're going to talk about sort of papers and esteemed business reviews, articles. Plain old news stories. Might even have some loosey goosey hangout sessions and whatnot. So we'll see what's in the pipe for that. But please subscribe, like, leave a comment, and most of all, join me for my next video and enjoy the rest of your day.